You set the iron kettle down. The word lands in the kitchen like a hammer on a nail. Useless. You do not look up. You do not flinch, because flinching is the only language a man like Callum Brennan listens to. The first morning of your marriage, and he has already filed you in the wrong drawer. It started 3 weeks ago, in a town called Livingston. On a Tuesday, so cold the mud cracked under wagon wheels. You had walked into the feed store with a satchel of dried yarrow and a reputation you did not ask for. The preacher's wife had sent you. 2 miners' daughters in labor at the same hour on the same floor of the boarding house, both saved by healing hands they said worked quiet miracles. You had not asked for the word miracle. You had only done what your mother taught you on the porch in Tennessee before the fever took her and the wandering life took you. Callum Brennan was at the counter, buying salt and sulfur. 43, maybe 45. Sun-creased. A widower with a boy of 9, a girl of 6, and a Montana ranch that was dying in ways he could not name. He watched you for the length of a long breath. Then he offered what he had. Food, shelter, cattle of your own if you proved useful. You said yes. You were 31 years old and the snow was coming, and the road north was already buried under October. Also, and you would not have admitted this to a soul, you were tired of being a woman with no last name to lean on. So you climbed into his buckboard and you married him in the parlor of a judge who had known Callum's first wife. And you rode out to the Brennan place under a sky the color of old iron. The Brennan Ranch sits in a fold of the crazy mountains, where the wind comes down off the snow line and finds no fence to slow it. 230 head of cattle when the year began. Maybe 190 by the morning. Callum called you useless. You had counted the ribs of the cows at the salt lick. You had looked at the water in the well. The water. You noticed it the first day. Noticed the way the cows drank and then stood apart from the herd. Noticed the dullness in their eyes after a few days at the trough. Noticed the white rims around their gums, the way a person gets when their blood is wrong. You had seen it before, in a holler outside Knoxville, when you were 16 and your mother still had the use of both her hands. Iron in the water. Too much iron, leached out of a vein of red rock somewhere uphill from the well. Cattle drink it. The iron settles in the gut. The animal stops eating. The animal lies down. The animal does not get up. You know what kills a cow like that, because you have watched it. And you know, because your mother told you, what saves one. Lemon balm. The plant your mother called Sweet Mary. It grows along the riverbank where the Brennan place meets the cottonwoods. In the damp soil the cattle never reach, with its small heart-shaped leaves and its quiet lemon smell. You had walked down to the river on your second morning with your satchel over your shoulder, and you had not told a soul. Now Callum stands in the kitchen doorway, sleeves rolled to the elbow, a cup of cold coffee in his hand. He is looking at the stove the way a man looks at a thing that has failed him. A wife like you is good for nothing, he says. You cannot milk, you cannot bake. The boy burned his tongue on the porridge you made yesterday, and the girl asked me last night if you were a witch. You take a breath. You let the kettle cool under your hand. Outside, the wind is moving through the cottonwoods, and somewhere down the slope, a cow is lowing the way cows low when their stomachs ache. You do not say a word. You walk past him. You take your satchel from the hook by the door. You walk out into the cold morning, down toward the river, where the sweet Mary grows thick along the bank. You have 30 days of work ahead of you. You have 200 lives to save. And you have a man in that kitchen who will never, not once, think to ask what is in your satchel, or what is in the well, or what you are doing down by the water with your sleeves wet to the elbow and lemon stains on your fingers. You start picking. You do not argue. You do not announce what you are doing. You simply stop letting the cattle drink from the well. The herd moves by habit. You walk down to the lower pasture at dawn, before Callum has finished his first cup, and open the brush gate to the river strip. The cows follow, because the river is cold and sweet, and they can smell the difference. By the 5th day, the change is small. The cows drink longer at the river. They stop standing apart. A few of them begin to eat again, slow and greedy at the salt. By the 10th day, the dullness is gone from the eyes of a young heifer you have taken to calling Ruth. You brew your medicine in the cook shack behind the main house, the one Callum built for his first wife, and no one uses now except the cat. You boil a pot of river water. You strip the lemon balm from its stems and bruise the leaves between 2 flat stones. You let the green smell rise with the steam, and you remember your mother's voice on the back porch in Tennessee. In that low, workmanlike way a woman speaks when she knows a thing and wants you to know it too. The iron in the well water is not poison, she told you, the summer you turned 15. The body carries iron, too much or too little, and either one makes a creature sick. Sweet Mary is not a cure. It is a key. It opens the gut. The animal can pass the iron. The animal can eat again. The animal lives. You watched her measure the leaves by the pinch. You watched her check the gums of the neighbor's horse, then of the neighbor's calf. You learned to read the rims, the way a banker reads a ledger. You carry that same measuring by the pinch down to the trough every morning before the men come out. You slip the bruised leaves into the water. The cows drink. You do not say a word to anyone. On the 9th day, the girl finds you. She is 6 years old, and her name is Ada, and she has not spoken to you since the night she asked her father if you were a witch. She stands at the cook shack door in a flour sack dress and bare feet. You do not look up. You keep stirring. After a long time, she comes in. She sits on the floor. You ask her if she would like to smell it. She nods. You cup a leaf in your hand and hold it out. She sniffs. Her face does something you have not seen on it before, which is the look of a child meeting a new smell for the first time. It smells like the river, she says. You tell her it grows by the river. You tell her it is called Sweet Mary. You do not tell her what it is for. She does not ask. She sits on the floor for another quarter of an hour, and then she goes back to the house without a word. That night at supper, she tells her father, "The new wife smells like the river, and not a single one of you knows what to do with that." Reyes, the oldest hand on the place, finds you on the 11th day. He is a small, dry man from Sonora, missing 2 fingers on his left hand. He stands at the fence, hat in his hand, and says, in the careful English of a man who learned it late in life, that the patron is asking why his cattle are suddenly wanting the lower water. You tell him the truth. You tell him the well is full of iron. You tell him Sweet Mary fixes it. You tell him your mother knew. Reyes looks at the trough. He looks at the green tint in the water. He says nothing for a long time. Then he says, "My mother knew something about a plant too, in a country I have not seen in 30 years. He puts his hat back on. He walks away. He does not tell Callum. You do not ask him to. By the end of the 3rd week, you have saved every animal that was still standing, 187 head. The 43 you lost in early autumn are bones on the back pasture, and that weight sits on you in a way you do not talk about at supper. The rest of the herd is fat and glossy, and they low at the gate at dawn, because they are ready for the river, and Reyes tips his hat when you pass him in the morning, which is the only thanks a man like him has learned to give. You go on picking. By the 4th week, the herd is the best looking in the valley. You hear it from the riders who come in from the East Range, and from the man at the supply post in Clyde Park, and from the cattle buyer who rides up the long road on a Tuesday afternoon in his linen coat and his clean boots. He has come down from Helena, and he has heard there is a man in the crazy mountains whose cows are heavy in a year, when every other herd in the territory is going under. He has come to make an offer. You are in the cook shack stripping balm when the men gather at the front of the house. You hear Callum's voice, deep and slow, the voice he uses when he is trying to seem larger than he is. You hear the buyer's questions, and you hear Callum answer them, and you stop what you are doing. "Ain't no secret to it," Callum says. "We had a hard summer. We had a wet autumn." The herd turned around. Cattle do that. I have been at this 30 years. I know what I am about. The buyer asks who cured them. Callum says, "The weather turned." The buyer asks again. Callum says, "The Lord, I reckon," and changes the subject. You stand in the cook shack with your hands in the green water, and you feel the old Tennessee patience come up through your wrists, and you do not go out to correct him. You are not doing this for him to know. You are doing this because a cow is a creature, and a creature is a life, and a life is a thing you do not let go of just because the man you married cannot see what is in front of him. Reyes is the one who breaks the silence. He steps off the porch and walks down to the cook shack, and he stands in the doorway, hat in his hand, and he says, in that same careful English, that a man who lies to a buyer is a man who lies to himself, and that the patron has done enough of that to last him. You ask him what he is going to do. He says he is going to tell the buyer the truth if you will let him. You nod. He walks back up to the porch. He takes off his hat again. He speaks. The buyer listens. He looks at the trough. He looks at the river strip. He looks at the herd. He buys 60 head on the spot for a price that will keep the Brennan place through the winter, and he asks Callum, plain as day, why the man did not just say so. Callum does not answer. He stands on the porch with his coffee going cold in his hand. He does not go into the house. He walks down to the cook shack, and he stands in the doorway, and he looks at you with your sleeves wet to the elbow, the green stain on your fingers, the satchel full of leaves on the floor. He says nothing for a long time. Then he says, "The trough." The trough is what saved them. The buyer said the trough. You tell him the trough is not what saved them. You tell him the well water was killing his cattle. You tell him the lemon balm in the trough is what opened their gut and let the iron pass. You tell him you saw it in Tennessee when you were 15. You tell him your mother taught you, the way his own mother must have taught him something, and that he would do well to remember that a quiet hand on a quiet plant is older than any man on this porch. He looks at the leaves. He looks at his boots. He looks at the herd out past the river, fat and glossy in the late afternoon light. He says, in a voice that is not the voice he used at breakfast a month ago, that he is sorry for what he said in the kitchen. He says the words slowly, the way a man says a thing he has never had to say before. He says he was wrong, and that is the end of it. And the next time he says it, he will know it, before he says it. You do not take his hand. You do not forgive him with a speech. You pick up the satchel and walk past him, down to the river, to do the work that has to be done before the sun is gone. Behind you on the porch, you hear Callum sit down on the step. You hear, after a long time, the small sound of a man setting his coffee cup on the wood, very gently, as if he is trying not to wake the house. You wonder, walking down through the cottonwoods, whether there is a man in the world who ever learned something true without breaking something first. You wonder if you will give him the chance to learn the next thing.